it's an Oryx video, so this has to be done. Excuse me. Wow. Hello everybody, it's the Warhipster here, coming at you with another box build sprue review type video. And of course we are here with the brand new Forces of Destruction. Yes, we have Zoggrok Anvilsmasha. We have the new Ardboys. We have the Ardboy Big Boss in 2D. We have the weird Brute Wreckers and Brute Ragerz that are in here. We have the Tuskboss on Maw-Grunta. And last, but by no means least, we have Trugg and his great Trogg horde. Trogg herd. Damn it! Yes, we have Trugg, the Troggoth king. It's really difficult to say properly every time because it's a weird trip of the words for me. And we have all of the new Ironjawz Oryx, and it's an absolutely wonderful time to be a Grand Alliance Destruction fan, particularly those fans of you out there of the greenskins. Yes, there are piles and piles of new Ironjawz to get through, and well, is it just me, or is AOS just absolutely killing it more than 40k, more than it usually does in terms of its model quality? I mean, think about it. Seraphon, Cities of Sigmar, Ironjawz, Trugg the Troggoth King. I mean, 2023 has been pretty good, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some things along the way. Now, that's not to say that 40k hasn't had some breathtaking models, but right now, I think Age of Sigmar is really much in the ascendancy, especially when you compare Cities of Sigmar and these Ardboys to, say, the Tyranids and the Space Marines. I know I'm kind of starting a fire here, but I gotta say, AOS is, well, crushing it. And if you happen to agree with me that AOS is absolutely crushing it right now, you should subscribe. And you should like this video and you should comment below to tell me why you think AOS is crushing it. And if you think 40k is the best of all times and AOS will never surpass it in terms of its model quality, you should also subscribe. You should like this video. You should comment below to tell me why I'm a horrible person. So if you're as excited as I am to dive into these kits, spoiler alert, I've already dived into them. More on that later. But if you're excited as I am to have a look at these sprues once again, then you're in luck, because that's what we're going to be doing right now. Alright, so we're going to kick things off nice and simple here with the Ironjawz Ardboy Big Boss. And it comes in a little clam pack, as you can see, so you can see everything that you get inside the box through the plastic. Now, for those of you who don't know how to open these, you get a little tab just here. And what you do is you just pull down and then pull it apart. Like that. Nothing but your brute strength required to open these up. There we go. The reason I'm showing this is because I didn't know that until about a year ago. Used to use scissors and things. So inside you get yourself one sprue, one 40mm base by the looks of things. And you get this little instruction booklet here with a painting example on the back and on the front. I always find that these ones are really quite useful to look at, just to hold, because you get a really nice close look at them, and it's usually a very nice high-res photo on the back, whereas on the front it always seems to be a little bit out of focus. Don't know why that is, probably because of the coloured paper. Anyway, it's just the 2 pages of instructions, as you can see, and it looks like there's only 8 components. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There you go. So this is really very, very simple, which is really cool, especially for a model of this size. I'm just going to check that this is in fact a 40mm base by measuring it up against a Space Marine Captain. Yeah, there we go, 40mm base. There we go, lovely stuff. So he should at least be comparable to a Stormcast Eternal. So let's have a look at the sprue, shall we? We've got lots of just kind of very big components here. The body is all in one piece pretty much, and we have our breastplate or the back plate. We've got kind of this really lovely glaive just here, the head, and we've got the little totem on the back. We've got another bit of armor just there. So this is a really cool little sprue because there's lots packed in here, not in terms of components but in terms of details, and it seems to me on first glance to be pretty well laid out. So for example, on this glaive here, we have a connection point to the sprue on the underside of the weapon. So just here, and because that's going to be planted in the ground, you don't have to worry too much about smoothing that down perfectly. The other connection point is here in the joint of the arm, so that will go in really nicely. Again, don't have to worry too much about smoothing it down perfectly. And then the other two connection points are here on the backwards part of the flat of the blade, and then here on this kind of blunt part of the cutting blade, so rather than it being, for example, like right there, right in the middle of the bit where it cuts. Similarly here on this piece, which looks like the chest plate, thinking about it, what we have is we have our connection points on the smooth flat bits. Now these are kind of outward facing details, but they should be right in under his armpit. So again, you don't have to be 100% when you're carving those out in terms of smoothing them down. You know, kind of worrying too much about gouging on these at least. Similarly on this, which by deduction is the back plate because the totem goes in there, we got the connection points around the outside of the piece. So for example, just there, and just there. So this is the only one where it's kind of encroaching on the outward facing details. So that's the only one you have to really watch out for, that you don't gouge it. Now on the head, it'd be nice to say everything's brilliant here, but on the head we do have a connection point on the top of the head, even though that's going to be right at the back, hidden away. That is always one place just to watch out for. And then sadly on the horns here on the front of the mask, we have connections actually on the smooth parts of those horns. So they're very important to watch out for and make sure you get them nice and smooth, and don't cut them too deep with a knife. Try and use a mold line remover if you can. The totem is the same thing. We have a connection point actually where it's going to glue in, but then we have one right on the top of the sort of skull just there, so do watch out for that so you don't kind of carve it so it's all flat on the top. And here on this, I'm going to assume cod plate, cod piece, whatever that's going to be actually called. We have a connection point on the top of it, so that'll be nice and easy to smooth down. Now on this arm, again, same as this one, the connection point is right there in the joint on the flat of that blunt part of the blade at the front there, and on the non-cutting edge there, which is really good. The only place to really bear in mind is just this little bit just here on that muscle, just there on piece number 1, the main part of the body, and this one here, which is right under the armpit on the smooth flesh. So you just want to watch out for that. But it doesn't look to me to be too many mold lines. Of course there always are, and they've got one just running there up the leg, for example, but they're not too hefty, which is really good. So this is all in all a very cool sprue and a very cool model, given as it only consists of 8 components. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in and we're going to start building it, starting right now. So there's our Ardboy big boss, looking pretty awesome. So we're going to move on to the next one. And the next one in my box of tricks is Zoggrok Anvilsmasha and his best friend, Clonk. I don't know if they're friends. They're probably not friends. So yes, we're going to move on to Zoggrok Anvilsmasha. And of course within this you can build Zoggrok himself and Clonk. It's an excellent name. So what do you get? You get the instructions. You get one sprue. You get a 50mm round base and a 25mm round base. There is no confusing those two. Of course not. Now, inside the instruction manual, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 components, which is really cool. And we actually get a choice of weapon here. So there is, and I've got it in front of me, we have the Ward Smashing Chopper, which is this one, and we have the Grunta Tongs, which is this one here. Now the tongs are a buff piece for the rest of your army, and this makes him hit real good on 6s to wound. If the unmodified hit roll for an attack with the Ward Smashing Chopper is 6, and the target has any wards, that unit's wards are smashed. If a unit's wards are smashed for the rest of the battle, ward rolls cannot be made for that unit. So it's a very, very cool thing. Whereas the tongs let you pick a friendly Ironjawz unit within 12 inches, and they get mortal wounds on 4s or 2s. Well, 6s to hit, but it goes off on a 2+ with the tongs rather than a 4+, which he has as an ability anyway. So choice is yours. I'm probably going to go with the tongs because I think it's more of a buffing thing and it makes it more guaranteed. But that Ward Smashing Chopper is really cool. It's sick. I like it. Anyway, 20 components within this little instruction manual and on this one singular sprue just here. Now, having a good long look at this sprue now, as you can see, it is laid out pretty nicely, just like our big boss. So we'll start over here on the right hand side. So the chest piece here, it's got a nice connection point here in a bit kind of by the waist where it will be glued out of sight, so that doesn't have to be particularly smooth. However, we do have a connection point right on the top of his kind of neck just there, and that will be very visible, so do be very careful when you're smoothing that down. Although he does also have a large bit of armor that goes over the top there, so that should cover it up nicely. We've got connection points on his arms here and here. They are actually just on the flesh of the arm, so that's one thing to watch out for. Do be very careful around there. On the squig here, clonk, we've got connection point again on the smooth flesh, and then one here on the actual scales on the top, which is, that bit's okay, but these two are just ones, well, particularly this one was just one that you'll really have to watch out for. We've got a couple of really tiny fiddly little components, and they're not that small, but they are the kinds of things that are easy to miss. So we've got this little buckle here, and this part of the tongs, I'm guessing, is what they are, or they go on his belt somewhere, something like that. Do just watch out for these, because those are the types of pieces that are easy to miss. And then we've got areas such as like this kind of really cool piece of armor just here, which is, oh man, looks so good. This one as well, and this one here. This one is connected actually on the armor panel, whereas these ones are around the outside, and this one is also round the outside, which is really good. On the Ward Smashing Chopper, we've got a connection point on the hand, so that's a bit that can be covered up nice and easily, but we do have one right smack down there, right in the middle of the, I guess, cutting edge of the blade. So that's definitely a place you want to watch out for, and don't gouge it with a knife. Try and use a mold line remover if you can. The head here is connected at the chin, which is fabulous, and we do have a slightly flimsy chain, although nothing really about these is very flimsy, but it is a case of you make sure you want to clip it there when you first clip, and then here, and then finally there, because if you clip there you might put some stress here on the chain, so that's one of the things to watch out for. The squig head just here, it's got the actual connection points right there on the sides of the face, so that is definitely a kind of high priority area to make sure you don't gouge it, don't use a knife too vigorously, and you want to go from this angle outwards, because if you're going to go up kind of this way, north to south across the component, you run the risk of chopping out some of the lip if you're not careful, so do just watch out for that. Similarly, on this side of the body, we have a connection point on the underside of the tail. That's not too bad, but we do have one here on the front of the leg, so you will want to watch out for that. Otherwise, these are mostly all in really nice, kind of hard areas. Again, here on this leg, we've got a connection point on the underside of the trousers there, so that's one thing to watch out for. Similarly, on the two bits of flesh just here and here, so we will want to be bearing that in mind. On the kind of front tunic thing that he's wearing, the kind of butcher's apron or leather apron type thing that he's wearing, we do have a connection point right there on the smoothness of the fabric, so do watch out for that. Otherwise, this is looking pretty good. Some really nice sprue, 20 components packed in. There's lots to look at and a really interesting little model to build. Definitely a cool one, old Zoggrok Anvilsmasha, and he's so cool in fact that we're going to build him right now. So Zoggrok Anvilsmasha is built. As you can see, he is a hench boy. He's looking really cool. So, comparing them side by side, it's time to kick things into high gear for the Ironjawz. And we are now going to work on the Tuskboss on Maw-Grunta. Although specifically, there are 3 different variants you can build from this kit. So, within the box, the Maw-Grunta kit, shall we call it from now on, is we get one very hefty instruction manual, and we get 1 and 2 and 3 sprues, and we get a 120 or 100 mil oval base. This is a big boy. This is a very big boy. So let's have a look inside this instruction manual, shall we? So as you can see here, we've got the boss. Well, we've got 2 different variants of boss here by the looks of things, or in fact no, this is just an example of the color coding for what you can build. So here we have a case of, we build out the body by the looks of things first, yes, then we build the hack-in crew should we wish to use them, and then if we're going to build the Tuskboss on Maw-Grunta, we follow the blue path. If we're going to do the Maw-Grunta with hack-in crew, we follow the green path. And if we're going to do just a normal Maw-Grunta gouger, we just follow the pink path here. So we should then get to a case where you glue on the hack-in crew. And if you didn't want to use the hacking crew on here, you want to build it a normal Maw-Grunta gouger, you would just have 2 leftover Ardboys, which is really cool. Has the components to do that, which is awesome. There we go, Maw-Grunta gougers. So yes, there's 3 different units in here. The Tuskboss, of course, a Maw-Grunta with hack-in crew, and Maw-Grunta gougers. They come in units of 1, which is really cool. And well, there's a ton of stuff, as you can see, by having 3 different sprues, because it comes in a very thick box, which is really cool. So let's have a look at those sprues, shall we? Oh, in fact, we didn't check what the size of the base was. Should probably do that, you know. 120 mil oval base. I'm not lying to you. I know the camera can sometimes think that things are smaller or larger than they actually are, but this is going to be big. So we have 3 individual sprues here. It might look that these 2 are a bit similar, but they are completely different. So we are going to look at all 3 of them individually. And as you can see, the main body of the Maw-Grunta is enormous. Look at it. It's so big. Oh man, I love this. I love this so much. It is a behemoth after all. Anyway, we're going to start with this sprue here. And we're going to have a quick look at it. Now, it won't be very easy to kind of determine what all the components are at this point. It is one of those things where there's so many components on here, we will have to follow the instructions along. But we do have some stuff that's quite recognizable, of course. So we've got, like, for example, this large tusk just here and this one here. We've got really big weapons, which are really cool. I think these are the boss's weapons rather than the hacking crew. I think they're over somewhere else. But firstly, let's have a look at how this is laid out, shall we? So, for example, here on these large kind of, they look like whale jaw bones, as it were. But we do have the connection points on kind of, I'm assuming, the underside of the component, because, you know, well, the spikes are facing upwards. Never say never, but it would make sense that they are. So that's pretty good, because, you know, that means that they're easily concealable if they're on the underside. Particularly on something this size, it would be kind of going along the bottom of the Maw-Grunta, I suppose. So, you know, that's pretty cool. But over here we do have the component on the top here, so that's one area you want to be very careful when you're smoothing it down. Make sure you don't gouge it out, of course. The legs here and here and here, we have our component connection points actually on the front part of the musculature. So again, it's just one of those things where you have to just be a little bit more careful when you're kind of smoothing it down. Again, I would recommend using a mold line remover, or, you know, the back of the knife, and just being really gentle with it, because you don't want to kind of smooth off that detail, so you get that kind of, almost, it looks like a chunk's been taken out of it once it's been painted. We have a face here, which is attached at the very top of the head, and that's quite a thick attachment point. So that's one of those things to watch out for. It might be that it gets hidden underneath a helmet or something, which is, you know, ideal, but it is one of those things where that is a very kind of high potential area for kind of taking way too much off the plastic, and therefore ending up with an orc with a flat top, basically. So do just be careful around here. Otherwise, the leg here is attached at the foot and inside the waist, which is really cool. This chain, they're really thick chains, so you don't have to worry too much about snapping these. This tusk has got a connection point on the inside, so that's a little bit tricky to get to. Outside areas on curved details are quite easy to thin down, whereas on the inside, you kind of got to get that angle absolutely spot on and just take it lots of small cuts at a time, rather than trying to gouge the whole thing out, because you'll end up kind of creating a right angle in the component otherwise. Same thing over here as well. We have a little tiny detail here which looks like a mustache, but I know it's not. So do just watch out for that one, component number 12. Again, this leg is attached on the underside of the foot, which is great, but then we got it right there on the butt, so on the smooth of the leather, so that's one thing to watch out for. The weapons are, again, like in the previous ones, we seem to be attached on the non-cutting edge, which is great, and then on that flat part of the cutting edge there, so rather than on the actual cutting edge of this sword. But we do now have it happening on the axe. We have it actually on the cutting edge of the axe, so do watch out for that if you're going to be using that axe. Otherwise, it's a pretty good sprue. Mostly things are connected towards the outside. Again, watch out for things like arms. Again, we've already mentioned these, but there you've got that connection point on the actual muscle. Same over here, and same here as well. And these are all kind of things to point out that, you know, again, just be very careful when you're using the back of your knife or your mold line remover, so that you don't cut straight sections out of a muscle, because you don't want that to happen, because then you get a flat top of the muscle and it doesn't look great. So just follow the curvature of the muscle when you're filling it down. That's a really cool sprue though. Anyway, let's move on to the next sprue, this one, which looks like the left hand side of the pig, our right hand side, should we be looking at it face on. And this is a really nice sprue. Oh my, it's impressive that it's basically just one component here, and the tail is attached here, so you don't have to worry too much about kind of multi-part tails, which is really nice. I like that a lot. And we have connection points mostly in smooth areas, which makes a really nice change. It's not like sat right in the hair around here, which is really good. So we've got the hair on the smoothness of the underbelly, here on the inside where the head will go, presumably. We got it on the top here of the armor, and that is right on the seam just there. So that's one of those kind of, again, just be very careful and try not to take any of the actual component off. You just want to cut it, you want to snip it, and then you just want to cut it nice and smoothly against the actual armor plate, because that way you don't get a gouge and then you don't get that kind of overlap like this with the fingers type thing. We have a connection point again, same back here on the segmented armor back there, and then we have it on top of this kind of, well, bone-like structure just there. The large armor plates of the actual Maw-Grunta here and here and here, they're all attached on a kind of a 2D plane of the sprue. They're all attached there on a kind of flat, which is really nice. It's just around the outside, so it makes cutting these out really easy. We have similar things going on here with these legs, again attached on the underside here, which is nice, but on the smooth at the back. Then we have it on the actual back of the foot here and on the front there, so that's the leg to absolutely watch out for. Weapons, we are similar as we've already been. This body, again, connection point on the actual top, but presumably that'll be covered by an armor plate. If not, do just make sure you're very careful when you're smoothing that one down. Another thing to point out here is, again, these tusks have got the connection point on the inside of the curve of the tusk, so that's just one of those things. You just have to be very careful. This one's a little bit easier than the other two because it's right on that kind of where it starts to flatten out rather than right here in the corner. But nonetheless, it is good to watch out for. And then we do have one here on this kind of banner pole. We have that connection point on the outside of the horn, so do just watch out for that one. None of the really tiny components in here other than, say, maybe this, but it's not a brittle one at all. So yeah, that's one of those things. Just that's where 35 is, just to make sure you're not forgetting it, because it is a little one. Anyway, we have one more sprue, and I can't imagine there's going to be any surprises here, except this is where we are going to now encounter the head. We're just thinking we hadn't seen it yet. So this part of the body, we actually do have a connection point in the hair there, which is a little bit of a shame, but never mind. It's not on the other one, so we can forgive that, I guess, for now. Connection points here and here again on these segments of the armor. So again, just be very careful when you're smoothing that down so as you don't get that weird overlapping, as we've already talked about. Otherwise, we've got one on the soft underside of the leather here on the leg, on the inside of the waist, and there on top of that bone-like area, and then down where the head is going to go. That head is absolutely gorgeous. It's just in two parts. However, it is separated right down the middle of the head. So that is one of those things where it's going to have to just be very careful and make sure you have plenty of glue or some filler to make sure that you smooth that right down so you don't get a gap across the middle of the Maw-Grunta's face. Alternatively, if you're building the Tuskboss, you will be putting an armor plate right over the top of that. So across the top of the head, it shouldn't be an issue, but it will just be one of those things you've got to be very careful around the nose. That'll be the area that is the most important to make sure that it's nice and clamped tight with the glue, because otherwise you will have a gap, presumably. We don't know yet. But otherwise, I think the feedback broadly remains the same. For example, we got connection point here on the smooth of the muscle of this leg or trotter, but the armor plates, we are connected around the outside, which is really nice. The same for these bodies. Again, we've got a little connection point there on a muscle, but otherwise it's on the flat of the armor, which is really nice. This arm here connected on the flat of the armor. This is a really good sprue. The only thing I think maybe in terms of brittleness over here is to watch out for this chain. So I would clip this at the chain first and then clip it at the hand so as to not avoid any snapping. It shouldn't snap because it is a pretty sturdy chain there. But like I said, you can never be too careful with such things. This is a really, really cool kit and I cannot wait to build this. I'm going to build the Tuskboss because of course I am. And well, I guess it's time to get underway with that. So I shall see you back here in just a minute. So here it is then. This is a seriously impressive piece of kit. It is huge. Here's another Auroch as an example of size. Of something a little bit more recognizable. Here is a Space Marine in terms of size. This thing is enormous. It's wonderful. Right. Just because we've built the enormous wonderful thing does not mean that there are not more goodies to build. So the next thing we're going to build is the Weird Brute Wreckers. Now this is a dual kit. Within this box you get obviously the instruction manual. You get a pack of 3 40mm bases. You get 1 double-sided sprue, and we get 1 additional sprue. So it's technically 3 little kind of quarter-sized ones all together. There we go, like that, which is pretty cool. Now within this dual kit, you have the option to build the Brute Ragerz or the Weird Brute Wreckers. And the Brute Ragerz are those ones with enormous weapons, but they're not wearing helmets, whereas the Wreckers are the ones with wrecking balls and really cool helmets. So within this instruction manual, what you do is you do build up the entirety of the bodies, 1, 2, and 3, and then you choose, are you going to be a Wrecker or a Rager? I think I'm going to do the Ragerz because I think they're really cool. I just really love these large weapons. I think they're sick. Look at that. And that. Oh my goodness me. It's just such cool weapons. And, you know, I really like the idea of these guys. So I'm probably going to build them up rather than the Weird Brute Wreckers. So we're probably going to do the Ragerz as mentioned. So let's have a look at these sprues, shall we? So let's start with this one. And on here, what we do get is in fact one of those massive choppers. There we go. And as has been consistent so far with all of the weapons, or pretty much all of the weapons, we have our connection point on the inside of the curve of the weapon, on the non-cutting edge, and then on the flat part of the cutting edge, just here rather than the actual edge itself. And then the 2 connection points on the hands are in the wrists, which is really good. It's not on the top of it, making it much easier to smooth down. We have our really cool kind of like chain mace thing, which just looks unbelievable. I love this weapon so much. We have connection points on the smooth part here. We do have one actually on the wrist itself, on the actual visible part of the wrist just there. So rather than kind of on the inside, that is one just there, just to watch out for. But we do have it there on the kind of flat part of the inside of the wrist where it will join, so that's nice to see. This arm, we have a connection point on the actual musculature, same on this one as well. And well, that's just kind of one of those things. You've got to be very careful when you're smoothing those down. So again, you don't make those muscles flat by chopping too much out. We do have a slightly spindly little chain here, so we will want to make sure that we clip just there first before clipping the rest of it out, so that way we don't break it. But the weapons themselves with the big chains, they are really thick, so you won't have to worry too much about these snapping. The bodies here, we do have actually connection points just on the point where we're going to be gluing arms in and things like that, this is okay because it should mean that we can smooth it down nice and easily, but we do have it here on the front of the trouser. We have it on the kind of apex of those knee plates, and then we have it on the underside of the foot where it will glue into the base. So that's good, that's tricky, that's annoying, and that's okay. On this one, we have it on the underside of the foot, which is great, but again on the apex of the knee armor. So here, so you do just want to make sure you kind of get the cut in terms of the smoothing it down at the right angle, so that you don't kind of flatten off the point of the armor, because that doesn't look great. We have a connection point here on the trousers, although that is kind of more, its stud there is on the joint there, so that's one of those things where it's a lot easier to smooth that down. But you will want to make sure you don't forget that little nubbin that's just in there, because otherwise the model won't go together properly, and you'll be wondering why for ages. Just speaking from experience, that's all. This head here, we have a connection point on the actual top of the head, so you know I don't like that because it can make things a little bit more complicated. And the other one is here on the cheek as well, so again another slightly more difficult to get to area. But there's not tons of components on here,
which is interesting. The other sprue is in fact a lot more packed out. As you can see, this one feels, these two feel a lot more busy. Now we have similar points of order. We have connection points on the side of the cheek and on the top of the head for this head. And there should be a third one here somewhere. There it is. Connection point on the side of the head and on the top of the head. So you will want to watch out for all three of the heads to make sure you don't kind of cut off the top so they all have flat tops. The legs generally all seem to have at least one connection point on the knee itself. You can see it going on just there and there. So again, right at the apex of that pointed armor there as well. This one doesn't have it, so that's 1 in 6, which is not a great ratio. We do have the connection points on the underside of the feet though, here and here and here and here, which is really good. We have one right here in a slightly difficult to get to area just behind the knee on the soft part of the fabric, and this one is on the smooth part of the trousers as well, so do just watch out for those. Armor plates, what few and far between that we have them, are all again seem to be on the outside of the plates mostly, which is really good, makes smoothing them down nice and easy. And the weapons again, actually here, there we go, finally we have it. This chopper, we have a connection point on the actual cutting edge of the blade, so that one's going to be a little bit more tricky to get out, so make sure you're very careful when you're smoothing this one down. You do get lots of different types of weapon. Got some really big choppers, but we do have large macy type things, and we've got the wrecking balls as well. There's just lots and lots of customization here, which is really cool. Should be able to fix up some very interesting looking Auric kits here. We've got all the masks appear to be on these sprue. Yes, there aren't any on the other one. So there's this one here and that one and that one and this one. There's lots of different options here for the weird brute records rather than for the Ragerz. They kind of, the big fundamental difference is they go without the helmets, and they also all have wrecking balls. Whereas for the other ones, it's a bit more of a mix and match for the Ragerz, which is really cool. Otherwise, I really like this sprue. I think there's, again, similar feedback on areas, nothing kind of too dramatic here. Connection points on muscles here and here and here. And over here on this arm as well. So you will just want to be careful on all of your arms. And, well, we should jump in and we should start building them, starting right now. So with our brute Ragerz all built, as a size comparison, once again, we shall gather up our faithful Space Marine, as you can see. Oh dear. I mean, they don't cross over, but they look absolutely wicked. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. So, we have one last Oryx kit, or Ironjawz kit left to build. And that is, of course, the Ardboys. Here they are, the brand new ones. So in the box, you get yourself a bag of 10 32mm bases and the instruction manual, naturally. And you get 1, 2, and 3 sprues. Now, as far as I can make out, they are all individual sprues. There are no duplications here, as far as I can tell. Maybe this one? No, they're all 3 individual sprues, which is really, really, really cool. And are there any different options? Why, yes, indeed there are, but we'll get to that in just a moment. So yes, 10 32mm bases and 3 individual sprues. And what you do here in these instruction manuals, as they've done for most of these, we build the entirety of the bodies. So there's 4 of them there, and they go together in sort of 1, 2, 3 pieces, or 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. So you build all 10 of your bodies, and then, so as you can see, we have 2 different types you can build. Ones with stickers, not stickers, but stickers, the Ardboy stickers. These are the spear ones, and we have Ardboy choppers as well. There they are. I think the differences between them are basically reach and the ability to hit. I'm probably going to go with the choppers, because whilst they have less range, they do get a couple more attacks as far as I can remember. In fact, if we just check the back, we can see the choppers there are number 1, 2 attacks, 3+3+, -1 damage, 1, -4. That can't be right. That cannot be right. I'm pretty certain that they are also -1. If I was to look in the book, I will just check that now. Ardboys, where are you? There you are. Yes, -1. They're not -4. They can be an extra minus if they charge, I believe. Improve the rend characteristic of this unit's Ardboy stickers by 1 if the target made a charge move in the same turn. There you go. So yes, don't listen to the back, because they're not -4 rend. That would be disastrous. Anyway, you do have also the option to build a standard bearer, and he's not holding a big flag. Instead, it's just a little totem pole on the back, which is really, really nice. It's quite subtle, but I like it. I like it a lot. Orcs don't have time for sticks which don't have pointy things. So, you know, there you go. Really, really cool little instruction manual. Very, very simple as well. Build the bodies and then choose your choice of helmet, your choice of weapon, and your choice of shield as well, which is really cool. And I think they're all interchangeable as well. Yeah, by the looks of things, they absolutely are. So, you know, that's really cool. So let's have a quick look at those sprues then, shall we? So we'll start with this one because it's the one on the top. And I don't think there's going to be any surprises here as to what we've already discussed about most of these Oryx kits that we've already seen. We are going to have a kind of hodgepodge of things that are really good, and at the same time occasional little bits of areas that we have to bear in mind when we're kind of building them. So for example, the weapon here, 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 and here, they're all connected at either the wrist, the base, and the blunt part of the blade. So that is all brilliant. Love it. Particularly on this sprue. We have a couple of shields, and we actually just have the, well, no, we do have 2 shields here. We have 2 shields here, and they're all connected on the outside of those armor panels, which is really cool because it means it's nice and easy to smooth down. And then on the bodies, we are connected on the underside of the foot here and here and here and here and here and here and here, which is great. But then we do have the occasional one where we have to watch out for some connection points on muscles. So we've got one just there, as you can see when my knife is pointing. This one is right on the shoulder of this Ardboy. This one is on the actual armor plate here, like on the flat of the armor plate. So that'll be a really obvious one you have to bear in mind as you're building. So it's basically a case of, this shouldn't be anything that's too surprising here. We have a head here and we have a head here, and they are both connected on either side, but basically on that cheek. So this will be kind of open to interpretation as to whether or not it's easy or difficult. So for example, this one here should be pretty simple because it's, you know, right there out in the open on both sides, which is really good. However, in here it gets a little bit more tricky because it's in an angle and the ear is just there. So you want to be careful. You want to kind of smooth down in this direction on a head like that rather than up that way, because you can end up taking the end of the ear off, which might not be the worst thing in the world, but it might be that it's kind of more consistent, that type of head. For example, here, again, it's quite a straight cut, and you are going to have to go this way towards the ear because you've got these little studs here on either side. So that's just something to point out and bear in mind as you are building all of yours. Next sprue, similar things once again. The weapons all connected on the blunt parts, apart from this one that seems to be on an actual sharp part of the blade, so that's something to watch out for. We have a cool axe here, which is nice. This probably goes on our champion. But again, connected on the blunt parts and in the wrist, which is really good. Really like that. We have our shield once again here and here, and they are all kind of connected towards the outside of the piece, which is great. But again, bodies, same deal. Heads, same deal once again. I should point out that these arms here that you might have seen cropping up, these will be, they're kind of the bits that hold the shield. So you choose them and then you attach the shield to them. And that's it's a really nice little elegant way of doing this, because it means you can mix and match your shields as you see fit, and indeed as you see fit on the arms as well. So we recommend building all of the arms just so that you can dry fit them as you build them, to make sure you don't get any kind of slightly weird angles as you go. This is really cool. I like this a lot. But yeah, same feedback for this sprue. Naturally, I'm not spotting anything that's really leaping out of me as too different. Again, legs connected at the undersides, heads connected at the cheek sides, and we don't have it seem to be on the top, which is really nice. Oh no, we do have it right there. Eat my own words. Oh, and we have it up here as well. So again, just watch out for any areas where you have connection points on the top of the heads, because that can always be one of those things where you end up cutting it too fine. This one, for example, that is an armor panel just there, so that's not too bad. But when it's a bare head and you have that connection point on the top, for example, this one here, it's one of those ones where you have to be really careful and kind of smooth it with the curve of the skull, so that you don't kind of, like I said before, take the top off and end up giving him a flat top head, which just looks a little bit strange. Otherwise, this is the third and final sprue, and again, the feedback is pretty much the same. We do have a spear here, which has, rather than a kind of a single non-cutting edge and a cutting edge, we have just a double sharp stick. So we do end up having a connection point there right on the cutting side of a blade. But in all, they're pretty good. This one is a little bit tricky, component number 87, because it's connected right in that little divot. So again, it's quite difficult to get in there and cut off any flash, and indeed clip it off nice and clean. So do just be very careful with that one. Again, you just take it slow and move with the curvature of the piece, because otherwise you might end up like kind of taking either too much of that bit end off or too much of that end off, or indeed just putting a great big gouge in the weapon, which you might not necessarily want. So yeah, I mean, all in all, this is a really good sprue. It's packed with tons of details, loads of options, lots of customization here, and it should be pretty easy to get loads of different looking Ardboys, which is just great. It's not as kind of one-dimensional as it might possibly have been. The bodies seem fairly kind of build in a specific way for all 10, but that doesn't mean that the heads and arms and all that can't be swapped about with reckless abandon, which is really nice for a horde army. And well, we should begin building that horde by building the Ardboys. So with our Ardboys all built, here's two of them. Compare them with our Space Marine. As you can see, they've got pretty decent heft to them. They're pretty cool. I really like them. There's so much detail on these guys. They look amazing. But we've got all 10 built, and I will show you all of them. But we do have another box left to build. Of course we do. We have Trugg's Great Trogg Herd. It is a mighty box. Here it is. So inside there are 7 whole miniatures, which doesn't sound like a lot, but what we do have inside is we have 1 Trugg, the Troggoth King, and 6 rock gut Troggoths. They're all big models. They're all pretty spicy. However, we do have a pretty thin on the ground instruction manual. It's not very big, this one. But what we do get inside here is 1 100mm base and 6 50mm bases. So here is our bag of 50mm bases. Here is Trogg, or Trugg, the Great Troggoth. the Trugg. That's got away with me. Trugg, the Troggoth king. Here he is. He's on a single sprue, which is very interesting. And then inside, these should be pretty familiar sprues. What we have is we have 2 sets of rock gut Troggoths. So here's the one set, the other set here, and then another set here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sprues in total in the box, and there is our 100mm base for Trugg. Just pop that down over there and move these sprues out of the way. So if we have a quick look in the instruction manual, here it is. It's not that big. Now here he is. So Trugg, the Troggoth king. There are no options on him as far as I am aware. He is just built as he is. So he comes on 1, 2, 3, 4 pages, 4.5 pages, and then we have our rock gut Troggoths, and they come on 1, 2, 3, 4 pages, and of course there are 6 of them in the box that you can build. There's plenty of options on the Troggoths, but we're mostly focusing here on Trugg. So we're going to look at him and then we'll come back for the Troggoths afterwards, because we will have a little look at those sprues, because sprues are cool and I've never looked at them before. And for those of you who are just dipping in to the Troggs or the Troggoths, it'll be a useful section for all of us. So popping that to one side, let's have a look at Trugg's sprue. Now it is impressive that a model of this size and detail comes on a single sprue, which is it's 2 half-size sprues, but it is a single sprue nonetheless. And here it is, and as you can see, he is going to be a mighty boy. He's not too big, but he's very large. Obviously, once we build him, we'll know a little bit more. But let's have a little look at this sprue then, shall we? So we'll start on this half of the sprue. So, firstly, wow, look at these pieces of plastic. This massive hammer is in 2 pieces, 3 pieces. So there's going to be one that goes up here and another half of the arm that goes there. So that might prove to be a little bit frustrating, because there might be some gaps all the way along the seam of the hammer, and similarly along here on the arm. We'll have to know how well these components go together, but that does indicate, and looking at things like this section here on this large kind of part of the body, you can see that the arm is in 2 halves, and it's not kind of along the seam of a muscle there. That seems to be across the middle of a muscle, so you will have to absolutely make sure you don't have any gaps going on there. Just use either a fair amount of glue or have some green stuff on standby. The gate that goes on his back, here, all over the place. There's quite a lot of details here. It's quite a bewildering sprue to look at, not easily identifiable at first, because this arm slots into there. So as you can see, there is a large gap that just goes all the way along the front of the arm. So that'll be one thing to watch out for when you're assembling him. But anyway, we're looking at this sprue here first. It's pretty cool. With a model like this, there aren't too many kind of smooth armor panels that are going to be particularly easy to deal with when it comes to clipping out and cleaning these components down. It is quite a lot of kind of smooth muscles and stuff like that. So you will probably need to have a mold line remover on standby so that you don't gouge it too much with a knife, for example, or just be very careful. As we have talked about with the Oryx, you want to always go alongside the curvature of the muscle rather than just go straight through like a, straight as an arrow. You will end up just kind of chopping bits off. And on a model such as this, where, for example, the arms are quite a big part of the centerpiece of it, it'll be one of those things to absolutely watch out for. The rocks and that should go together pretty easily, and you won't have to be too careful here when it comes to smoothing them down, because, well, it's rocks. Any inconsistencies there is fine. It absolutely just fits with the whole aesthetic of it being a rock, as it were. but there doesn't seem to be too much like wasted space on this sprue. There's a lot more components on this one than there is on the other one, which is really cool because a lot of this is in quite large bits, which is encouraging, especially to be able to fit it onto a single sprue. Again, a model of this size and stature, it is one of those things where you would expect it to be on sort of 3 sprues maybe, or at least 2. Have another sort of half-size one around here where they've kind of split out things like the toes, for example, even more so than they already have done. But we do seem to only have one set of toes over here, and the other one is already on a large piece, which is really good. It's not like on both feet, for example, so it should be reasonably sturdy as well. This is pretty cool. We do have connection points along these vines, which will be things to watch out for. And we have a couple of diddy little pieces like this one here. It is only connected at the sprue on one place, so you don't have to worry about snapping it when you're kind of pinging it off the sprue, but it is just still worth bearing in mind that these small pieces can get lost when you're looking at the sprue, so just make sure you kind of make a note of where that one is. Same for this one over here. This will be the other part of the hammerhead. It will go on here. Take it back, it probably shouldn't be too much of an issue in terms of it looking, having a seam all the way down the middle. It's a pretty detailed hammer and it should be pretty cool. But yeah, it's in reasonably good shape. This was one area that you will have to watch out for on this component here. The large, I think, rotted antler of some description, because we do have connection points on the sprue right here, here, and here, and here as well, and there, and those are all kind of going to be fairly visible, and they are on the smooth details. So do just be very cautious with your knife or mold line remover so as you don't gouge it. Looking at the other side of the sprue then, we have another large body here. Connection points on the smooth musculature, as we've already discussed on the other ones, and on the arms and legs and things. We've got his tiny little face just here. It's very cute. I like this a lot. These are things to watch out for naturally because they are on the smooth parts of muscle. Same here on this foot, there, and there, and there. It's unavoidable on a model like this because, as mentioned, it's not like covered in smooth armor plates, which is going to be easy to smooth down. This is a nice piece though. There's only one connection point here on kind of a difficult part of like kind of that hair job there. It's mostly towards the outside on the thick pieces, so that's really good. Similar for this one over here, we have connection point here, 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 and here. They're just nicely situated on things like that. I would point out on this head that there is a connection point on the top of his nose, so that is going to be very visible if you're not careful, though it does feel like it is in one part. You're not going to stick two halves of a head together, which is great. Love that. Unless it's down here. Oh, we do have to stick the jaw on by the looks of things. Okay, well that makes sense. Anyway, yeah, it's in pretty good nick. I think it's a nice looking sprue. It's not too many components, which means it shouldn't be too difficult to build. However, it is one of those ones where you will just have to be careful all over, apart from doing any of the rocks and things like that. So let's get on with building it. We'll see how long it takes. So Trugg is now all built. He's a big boy. He's this big, in fact. My goodness me. It's a Troggoth king, indeed. Lovely, lovely, lovely. If you want to see it in comparison to our Maw-Grunta, they are similar. So, you know, two big monsters. Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. So, the last thing we're going to look at, I'm trying to find a place to put Trugg now. Pop him just there. The last thing we're going to look at is the rock gut Troggoths. So, in order to build these from the box, we get 1, 2 identical sprues, 3, and 4 identical sprues, as you can see. So, because it's 2 different kits of the same thing, right? So they come in batches of 3. So we're only going to have to look at one set of the sprues for this. And these are an old kit now, so some of you will already be familiar. They're not new ones, but they are new to me. So we're just going to have a quick look at the instructions here. So what we do is we build all 3 of their little bellies. Then we build the bodies. And then we stick them together by the looks of things. So we have 1, 2, 3 different options here. 4th different option for the rock, as you can see here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So plenty of different options and customizability available here for the Troggoths, which is really nice. Like that a lot. I'm into it. Ooh, I really like these alternative schemes down here. This one's really nice, as is this one. I might not box art these. Anyway, that's not for now, that's for later. So let's have a look at those sprues, shall we? Now, because these are a slightly older sprue, I'm anticipating large mold lines, which we do have on this sprue here. Don't know how well you can see them on the camera. You should be able to see them there. They're quite large, so that is one thing to watch out for. I wonder if it's the same on the other version of this sprue. So it might be that there's just a slightly, no, it is the same. So this sprue here is going to always have a bit of a mold line problem. This one is not quite as bad as the other one. They do still have them though. You can see that large one just there. So immediately there's going to be lots of smoothing these ones down to watch out for, which is a little bit of a shame, but you know, I mean, it's not that old a sprue, but clearly it's a popular one if it's been printed that many times that those mold lines are as thick as they are, especially on this sprue just here. Anyway, looking at them though, they are absolutely packed with detail. There is loads of stuff here, just tons of components. And as we mentioned, there are 6 different versions of Troggoths that you can build in the box, so you shouldn't have any duplicates if you don't want them, which is really nice. So let's look at this one first. We've got this really cool dwarven statue just there. I'm assuming it's a dwarf. It might be a Sigma, but looks more like a dwarf. We've got areas such as like these legs and arms and things that are obviously quite organic, but there's lots of kind of scales and things, which is one of those things where when you get attachment points on scales, it can be a little bit tricky to actually smooth them down, because you can end up like kind of just carving off a scale or cutting into other ones. So for example, around here, you have to kind of just really make sure that you're cutting it in the right direction. It will change from piece to piece, because it depends on how easy it is to get, say, a knife in here, for example. So on this one down here, it's probably easiest to go in this direction from right to left, whereas on another one it's probably easier to go from left to right, for example, or up and down. We do have, of course, smooth flesh as well of the Troggoths. So for example, just there we have connection points on here and here. So it is going to be one of those things where, because of the amount of mold lines, this is not going to be an easy kit to build in a very quick fashion, unfortunately, which is a little bit of a disappointment. It might just be my box. Yours might not have the same problem as this one, but they are quite thick. As you can see, there's one just here on this smooth belly, and on this smooth belly there is a large connection point on the actual smooth flesh of the belly right there, which is what I'm currently mold line removing into. So here and here, and that's going to be one of those things where, because it's right on the smooth part of the belly and it's up against the joint where it's going to connect, you have to be really careful as not to gouge it so you don't get that overlap on the 2 components, which is a little bit of a problem. Otherwise, it seems to be reasonably well laid out. There's loads of stuff here. You know, we've got this part of the, I guess that's just a sort of small hand mace, which is quite cool. I'm into that. It's nice. And we got the kind of the feet and things separately up here. We've got slightly smaller arms than I perhaps first anticipated, or maybe those are parts of the legs. Can't tell. So I always kind of lose my brain a little bit when I'm looking at things like this, because it's not like kind of as clear as, say, an armoured humanoid body. So let's have a look at the other sprue. This one is the one that has got those really thick mould lines on. And what we do have is we have areas such as these kind of necklaces and things where you have these kind of, I guess, sprue anchors or whatever they are, that you need to make sure that you carve off, because they're not meant to be there. Well, they are, but not on your final model. They don't serve any purpose other than to be cut off. And yeah, it's similar again, you know, just like with the Oryx, just like with most things. When you have an organic being, you have connection points on smooth flesh, which you have to watch out for. But with these, because of the amount of, scaling and scales and things, for example, on this back here, you've got connection points right here along the seam, and then you've got ones in here on the actual scales themselves. So just really making sure that you're careful as you're going along as not to carve out any scales or flatten any of them off, because you will lose some of that lovely texture if you're too vigorous with the knife. Otherwise, I don't really know what else to say other than that, you know, these are quite heavily mold lined, and that's always going to be a problem, in that it's not hard to get them off, but it does just extend your build time by a significant amount, especially when they're as thick as that, because it just means you have to kind of just be very careful and patient as you're taking them down and down and down and down and down, because if you try and go too quickly, you'll end up kind of juddering along the edge, and it just becomes a really unsmooth surface, which is what you don't want, which is the whole purpose of going through the mold line removal process. Well, we're going to build one set of them up. Probably won't do all 6, because, well, we only really need to paint a couple of them. But let's build one up and see how long it takes to build.
So I bet you're all wondering right now, did he manage to paint all of it in time? Well, the answer to that question is almost. First up, we have the Ardboys. There's only 5 here because the other 5 are still drying at the moment, but they are just absolutely fantastic and lethal. I love them so much. They look great. Next up, we have the Brute Ragerz, tattoos and all. They've been painted up and they look absolutely incredible. Just absolute wrecking balls, which is ironic because they're not the weird brute wreckers. Then we of course have Trugg, the Troggoth king. He's all painted and ready to go. I think he looks really great. Great challenge here to get that skin right and some of the blending and things, but once it's all on there it looks absolutely phenomenal. He's just a really cool centerpiece. Lastly, we have the Tuskboss. Yes, the giant pig to end all pigs. Here it is, and looks just, it's an absolutely incredible kit. We have to admit that right now. I think it looks amazing, and it was a lot of fun to paint it up, and I can't wait to show it off to all of you. Yes, top of my priority list today is to do Zoggrok, Anvilsmasha, and the Ardboys Big Boss. Got to get them painted up, got to get them videos done. So ultimately, what do we think of all of these kits? Well, I think first and foremost, this goes without saying. Characterful-wise, detail-wise, and the way they look, just absolutely fantastic. A much-needed upgrade to the Ironjawz. It's one of those things where I never would have thought, yeah, the Ironjawz desperately needs some new models, until they're actually placed in front of you, and you go, actually, do you know what? Those old Ironjawz don't look as good as these do. Not even close. Excluding, of course, Gordrak, because, you know, the murder cabbage will always be the best thing ever. So I don't think we can fault them for their looks, and I don't think we can fault them for just the wonderfulness that they are. In terms of putting them together, though, that's where we're really looking at the nuts and bolts here, of course, because, well, there's a couple of things. Firstly, the Ironjawz stuff all goes together pretty well. It's all fairly easy to assemble. The Ardboys are pretty cool. They are fairly adjustable, and you've got that option of the spears and the stabbers as well, which is really nice. So you can have quite a fair bit of variation in your force of Ironjawz should you wish for that type of thing. And of course, being able to mix and match all of those different shields across all of the different models is a really nice touch as well. The bodies are fairly one-dimensional. Well, they're not one-dimensional, they're in a 2D plane, but they are kind of fairly prescript. But you do have those choices of heads and different shields, and of course the different weapons, which should create enough variation so that you shouldn't notice that they are kind of almost a generic one build, but not really. I'm sure plenty of converters out there will be able to do some amazing things with these, including those of you over there in the 40k land. The Brute Ragerz / Weird Brute Wreckers. It's a cool kit. It's interesting. Those weapons are magnificent, and the fact that they're all pretty much in one single piece is really, really cool. It is a little bit difficult to kind of slot those back muscles and things together, because it's just one of those sort of like it's built by balancing in certain ways. You kind of have to have more components cut out than you perhaps really need to normally in order to make sure that you just kind of hold the thing together so that those connection points on the actual model all go together nice and smooth, so there's not too much gappage there. But fundamentally they're pretty easy to do, which is pretty cool. And like I said, those weapons are just absolutely breathtaking. Again, there's a ton of variation there, so you shouldn't have too many weird Brute Wreckers or indeed Brute Ragerz that look exactly the same, which is really cool. The two characters go together absolutely no problem whatsoever. Yeah, there's not really much else to say about that. And finally, we have the Maw-Grunta. And, well, it's a tricky one, this one, because it goes together really nicely, but then certain parts of it are actually quite difficult to assemble. Adding those kind of blades on the tusks when you're doing the Tuskboss on Maw-Grunta was actually quite tricky, because the one on the right hand side on the shorter bottom tusk has to really kind of slide in a certain way, and it's just kind of a little bit awkward. It's one or two components doesn't necessarily make a bad building experience, but there were times building it where it felt a little bit more tricky than it needed to be. And also the two halves of the pig itself, when actually assembling them, it required a lot of glue to try and make sure you didn't have a really big gapping line all the way down the middle. So that can speak to the quality of the components. Maybe they are slightly too big, and that mine were a little bit, I don't know, warped perhaps. Not really kind of noticeable way, but it just really had to press them together and hold them with quite a fair bit of glue to make sure we didn't have a really noticeable gap, for example, going right down the face and the back and all that kind of thing. Of course, naturally, a lot of it is covered up by armor and other details, so it's not too noticeable, and you can barely get to the belly of it. But really, there wasn't too much that was difficult about it. The crew were a little bit fiddly to attach, the hacking crew on either side, but it is what it is. They don't have any slots is the thing. They only attach by a chain on their backs. They don't have like a bit on the side blades where their feet should go, which was a little surprising, because you wouldn't necessarily have those side bladed bits unless you were having the hacking crew. So why isn't there a slot for their feet to go, just to really guide them in and kind of less of a balancing act? But otherwise, it is a really cool kit, and it does go together quite nicely. It's just minor nitpicks here and there that I have with the actual building of it. Now, as for Trugg was an experience. You see, building the top part, the bit with the ley stone on his back, was pretty simple. That went together quite nicely, and certain aspects of him were quite easy to build. But the actual body of him was very difficult. It was very, very tricky to put together, and very, very tricky to make sure it all lined up properly. And I don't think I did a particularly good job on it. I think there are folks out there who will do a much better job of it. But it wasn't until the model kind of settled, after I'd kind of finished toying around with it and building it, that I noticed that some parts had kind of just shifted a little bit to be more kind of rested where they wanted to be rather than where I wanted them to be. So there is a bit of gapping going on it. And I didn't have time to sit and kind of green stuff it all out. It's not too bad, but it was a quite difficult kit to put together. He's a beautiful model and he's wonderful and quite an interesting experience to paint, but in terms of building him, he was very, very, very frustrating. So that is a big markdown for Trugg. The Troggoths as well, that version of the Trogg herd that I have in the box with all those mold lines was a pretty disappointing experience. It just took way too long to build that one because of the mold lines, which was a poor experience. But again, that's just my experience of them, so that might not be necessarily what everybody experiences with the Troggoths. So a long story short is that, well, you know, Ironjawz, pretty much great. Trugg's great Troggoth, a little bit more complicated. So if we're going to mark the Ironjawz and Trugg separately, which I feel like should be fair, I'm going to give the Ironjawz an 8 out of 10. For Trugg, in terms of the build experience, I'm going to have to go for a 6.5 because it was really that frustrating to build. But again, just my experience. If we're going to go for an aggregate score across them both, I feel like 8 is probably fair. Maybe 7.5. Let's say 7.5 for the both, for the whole thing, if you're going to get all of it. But as per usual, I always say in these things, like, this is just the build experience and quality of the kit that we're marking here, because we have to take the aesthetic out of it. Because if we put the aesthetic out into it, it just becomes a flat 10. Because they look fantastic. They're breathtaking. They're amazing. Great additions to the Ironjawz and indeed Grand Alliance destruction as a whole. Gloomspike gets and the Troggs get actually a really cool centerpiece model, which is fantastic. And I think that's pretty much everybody now has one. So that kind of levels the playing field for pretty much every faction in terms of having that one big model, I think. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody. I probably am. Someone will correct me in the comments. So there we have it, guys. All done. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you're excited for your Oryx, for those Grand Alliance Destruction fans out there. And, well, for those of you who are fans of 40k Oryx, I'm sure there are plenty of bits and wonderful things in here that you could use to great effect for your Oryx armies. They are a pretty cool kit, and they definitely could be used across both. I'm just saying. I'm, well, admitting that, I guess. Fine. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon for another Sprue review, and indeed, plenty of painting videos on the Oryx Ironjawz and Trugg's great Trogg herd. Thank you so much, and I'll see you very soon. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support me a little bit further, you absolutely can do. Head over to patreon.com/Warhipster, just like all of these wonderful, amazing people have done. And you can also become a YouTube channel member, just like this incredible bunch of folks scrolling up on the screen before you. There's a hell of a lot of you, and, well, I can't do this without you. YouTube and Patreon, you guys absolutely keep the lights on and make all of this worth it. Thank you so much to all of you for everything you do. And if you really like this video and you just want to shoot me a little thanks, you can click on the thanks button just below this video. Don't forget to share it, like it, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And to make sure you stay up to date, don't forget to click the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Happy wargaming.